Hey, this is Nick Von Brack, and this is the Record Podcast. Back with a little mini episode here, a little pre-Thanksgiving update. Just got some stuff to run over with you all real quick. I want to thank you all for listening and checking out the podcast. In case this is your first time, this is a podcast where I interview musicians and music industry folks to get a little inside look on their careers, their personal lives, and all that good stuff in between. And on these mini episodes, I give an update on what's going on with the podcast, future interviews, music I'm listening to, and any other good little tidbits or questions you all have for me. And this week in the updates, we have a website, therecordpodcast.com. It has links to our iTunes, Twitter, Facebook, and Overcast pages, as well as updates and other good tidbits. And in other good news, we've reached over 250 listens to the podcast, which is awesome. I've had a few good interviews so far, and I'm looking forward to a lot of good interviews in the future. If you have suggestions on things that you want to hear, questions you want to hear, little twists or any other new things to the podcast, hit us up on any of the pages we have, Twitter, Facebook, all that. I'd love to hear suggestions, or you can email at therecordpodcast@gmail.com. Now this past weekend, I interviewed Casey Bates and Nick Newsham. Casey Bates is a producer who's been involved in a ton of records, Portugal the Man, Free Before the March of Flames, Foxy Shazam. I mean, this list is endless. And we had a good chat, good catch up. We combined his podcast, the Casey Bates podcast, and my podcast into a giant episode where we each took turns asking each other questions, and it turned out to be a fun interview. And in the future, you'll be able to go over to the Casey Bates podcast for a shorter interview with me, and our podcast for a long interview with him. And the other interview was with Nick Newsham, who is the former singer Gatsby's American Dream, and is the current singer of the Money Pit. Him and I go back a few years, so it was good to catch up with him. We talked about growing up, Gatsby's American Dream, how that all formed, that history, the Money Pit, and tour stories from throughout the years. And he's got some good ones, so you definitely have to check that interview out. Bands I've been listening to lately. I've been listening to a lot of Intervals, Chance the Rapper, and Paper Mice. Upcoming interviews. So I've got a ton of interviews lined up. I'm booked into May, and I have a lot of exciting people. But the next ones lined up start with my buddy Goose, who plays drums in Norma Jean, Rebecca Slapich, who plays violin in Mariachi El Bronx and also used to play violin in Kiss Kiss. So eventually I'm just going to get every member of Kiss Kiss in this podcast if it's the last thing I do. And my buddy John Alvin, who produced the self-titled album for us, and he's done a ton of great records, and it's going to be good to catch up with him too. So yeah, that's it. Another quick little mini episode. Hope everyone has a good Thanksgiving and you don't have to get into any political discussions at the table with your family because that's always unbelievably awkward. But have a good time, eat all the food, and I'll see you next Wednesday.
I wish I was stronger then. I was so much stronger now.